everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started here in just a minute. This is our March edition of the Sourcepass Digital Transformation Series webinar, with today's subject being disaster recovery planning in a post-pandemic world. I am Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Sourcepass, Dave Del Vecchio, and joining me on the call today is Guillermo Marquez, who is with Acronis and serves as their Senior Technology Evangelist for the Americas. I'll also be sharing this slide towards the end of the presentation, so if you want to take down our email addresses, you have the opportunity to do so. And the presentation is kind of structured in two halves. In the first half, I'll be providing kind of an overview of our the overview of disaster recovery planning in general, and some things that have particularly changed about disaster recovery planning post-pandemic. And then Guillermo's going to offer a little bit of insight into some of the technical aspects that are available in a modern backup solution, both for the backup of on-premise data stores and servers, and as well as those that are in the cloud. So a couple housekeeping items as we begin. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button. I'll probably present my section and then we'll break before we transition to Guillermo and address any questions at that point, and then we'll address the others on the back end. In addition, after the conclusion of today's webinar, you'll be invited to take a survey, and we would appreciate your feedback, because we'd love to know your feedback both on the content and the delivery of this information, as well as any ideas for future topics you might like to see considered for our webinar series. So as we get rolling, what's always interesting about these events is it's interesting to take a peek at our attendance list. And one of the things that struck me was we've got a broad kind of representation of our client base. We've got folks from small business, mid-market, and even some low-level enterprise size organizations. We've got some folks in a myriad of different industries, ranging from insurance to financial to healthcare to nonprofit. And what that just reinforced to me as I was looking at this is this topic is really applicable to all businesses. When it comes to being prepared, there's no one industry or size of business or any particular parameter that makes it unique to them. So I appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit about something new today. I know in some instances, particularly with folks who are in regulated industries, one of the drivers for this discussion is often the fact that backup and recovery is part of a security framework and might be required, especially from Sourcepass's standpoint. In this past year, we attained both SOC 2 Type 2 and ISO 27001 certification, and both of those certifications require that we have a written disaster recovery plan in place. Many clients we work with are in similar types of industries that require it as well. So sometimes it's not just a good thing to have, it's something that you are required to have to continue to operate in your industry. So with that said, we'll provide a high-level overview of some disaster recovery planning basics. And quite often, when I've run this session as an in-person event, I would usually ask for a show of hands, how many people have how many people have a written disaster recovery plan in place? And I think we've had one or two hands in the 6 sessions that we've run, and it was a judgment-free zone, because quite often this is the sort of task that a lot of businesses don't tackle unless there's a need. But what was interesting was those folks that did raise their hand did confess that the last time they updated their plan was about 5 years ago. It was pre the pandemic. And quite often, you'd like to think that digital transformation and the adoption of new technologies and things are driven by either corporate strategy of the CEO and the CTO. But one of the big things that changed the use of technology was the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic had on the flow of business once it happened. This is actually a picture of our East Hampton office, the call center in the East Hampton office, and it was taken exactly 24 hours after then Governor Baker of Massachusetts issued his stay-at-home order. And 24 hours prior, every desk in the call center was filled, and it was just, bustling with activity. And if you all think back to the impact that those stay-at-home orders had on your own business, everybody was forced to, and I know this was a dirty word during the pandemic, but pivot to try to get folks that were used to coming into those brick and mortar offices and give them remote access to be able to start working remotely. What a lot of companies did was, start trying to procure laptops, but quite often, if you recall, with the supply chain issues, they were very hard to come by. And what we sometimes saw were people pulling older Windows 7 laptops off of the pile that was supposed to be intended for recycling or out of that closet and re-provisioning them to get into the hands of users. The other thing that often happened was, in order to provide quick access, we were rolling out VPN agents for our clients like crazy, and people were connecting via VPN from the laptop at their homes back into the corporate office. And if anybody's worked over a VPN before, that connection speed was often quite challenging. So what you ended up with were a lot of very frustrated users. And the users often would be forced to find their own solutions. And so rather than try to work over that slow VPN connection, what they often did was either email themselves the file, and now you're dealing with a data loss issue and a lack of corporate control over where what could be sensitive information lives. An HR director who maybe isn't following the advice of the CISO, decides to download payroll reports to their local PC. Now you've got proprietary information or personal information stored on a non-company device. Another thing we would often see is that, a well-meaning employee working on a group project would say, well, I've got a personal, Google Drive account or a Dropbox account, and they would start to move company files over into publicly facing cloud storage platforms, quite often, almost always, without internal IT's knowledge. And this is commonly referred to as shadow IT, where folks, users in the environment are now coming up with their own IT solutions to better work in their environment. Well, now that the pandemic is ending, it's a great time to go back and start to inventory what sort of battlefield upgrade scenarios were put in place that need to be cataloged and maybe rethought. Many clients and businesses are going out and running 365 for email and perhaps dabbled in Teams a little bit. But as part of a 365 subscription, almost all include access to OneDrive, which is a corporate sanctioned file sharing platform that is part of your 365 tenant and can be better controlled from a security standpoint. So if you are aware of having pockets of users in your organizations that might be using public-facing consumer-grade cloud platforms, it's a great time to kind of rethink your usage of the cloud platforms that are available in the technologies that you already have deployed. I mentioned Teams. In parallel during the pandemic, we saw Teams usage explode because those employees that were used to collaborating when they were together in the office now needed a way to be able to communicate and collaborate remotely. And quite often what happened was a lot of the data that used to be stored on those traditional file servers started to make their way into the files storage capabilities built into Teams or even just attached to Team Chat. And so now what you've got is a lot of company data in a platform that may or may not be currently backed up. And so the importance of that cloud-to-cloud backup component of your overall disaster recovery plan is more applicable now than ever. You fast forward to 3 years and the infrastructures that have been put in place now power work from home and work from anywhere scenarios. And generally speaking, the user experience has gotten much better. But on the back end, we need to make sure that from a data governance and control standpoint, we have an inventory of where the data lives and that there's a plan to back up and recover that data, God forbid something were to occur. I like to say, be prepared. It's not just for the scouts. Ultimately, it's like insurance. Nobody wants to have to rely on it. But if an event occurs, you want to make sure that you've got a plan that you can implement to move forward from. So let's talk about what these kind of events might be and when you might need to call into account these sorts of plans. So the one common thing that many of these plans have is that they often get kicked off by some sort of a triggering event. And depending on the nature of the event could determine whether you have to reference your incident response plan, your disaster recovery plan, or your business continuity plan. So starting with the incident response plan, quite often these are plans that are in place that are specific to cyber risks. And usually there's some sort of an indicator of compromise that there might be some malicious actor gaining access to information, or perhaps there was data loss. And it's usually a short-term investigation and recovery time period, because what you need to do is run an assessment, determine what the risks are. If it is for real, how do you mitigate those? But usually they're short duration, and sometimes you'll find that you don't have to actually go through a full disaster recovery process. So you can think of an incident response plan as kind of a subset of a disaster recovery plan. Your DR plan takes into account not just the cyber risks, but potential data loss instances that can occur for a myriad of reasons, which we'll explore a little bit further. Tends to be a little bit longer in duration, and it encompasses all of the ways that organizations access information and technical resources. Business continuity plans are all-encompassing, not just technical concerns, but also all of the things that need to be taken into account to fully recover business operations. And that can range from technical concerns to, building burns down, we leverage our continuity plan, it gets rebuilt, and we're going to move back into it 6 months from now. Who remembered to reinstate the water delivery service and the coffee service? It's all of those things, whether they're technical or not. Do we have to get a cleaning service line back up? Those would all be things that would be incorporated into a broader business continuity plan. Sometimes you'll hear people leverage the terms DR plan and BCP, business continuity plan, interchangeably. In essence, a disaster recovery plan is, in the technical field, kind of a more common, it's a discussion point because we're talking about those technical plans for data recovery. Business continuity plans are just more encompassing. So what are those triggering events that would kick off any of those three types of plans? Well, we mentioned cybersecurity attacks. That's definitely a component, but you also have potential internal sabotage. You have a disgruntled employee who had admin access and did a slash and burn on a bunch of files. Are you able to bring those back? Natural disasters. To our New York area clients, you've lived through several hurricanes that have come up through New York, and that's not unique to your area. We've had various instances with snowstorms knocking out power up in the Northeast, for example. So definitely part of the consideration. Man-made disasters can have a big impact on businesses as well. Many years ago, probably a good decade or so ago, my company had a client who had an issue where there was a chemical spill in front of their building. And at the time, their phone system was still a traditional PBX phone system. And so it was the type that you needed to have access to the closet in order to administer changes. Well, they couldn't get physical access to their building for over a week, and no one could change the call forwarding, and phones, all of their business lines rang unanswered for a week before they were able to actually gain access to those and start forwarding calls to other phones and checking voicemails. So for folks that have moved to voice over IP phones who are accessible over the cloud, that actually helps prevent that sort of an issue moving forward, but it just reinforces how a man-made disaster can have severe business impact. And then utility failures. Again, those widespread power outages and things is another type of triggering event that might need to call into account one of these recovery plans. So, if you had a written disaster recovery plan or a business continuity plan, congratulations. It's a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort in order to put in place. If you haven't touched it since 2020, now's a perfect time to kind of re-examine the last draft and start to incorporate some of those changes that happened during the pandemic. If you haven't ever created a plan, you're looking at a blank sheet of paper and want to know how to start. So the first thing that you need to do is run a business impact analysis. The step of run, or the process to run a business impact analysis, usually if it's a small organization, it might be able to be done by a single individual. Typically it's a committee. And what they do is they inventory all of the different applications and the data that those applications store and generate. And they rank them according to criticality of the business. Now, one pro tip I will offer is that, it's quite often what people will do is try to crowdsource this, and they'll invite the department heads from every department, finance and accounting and marketing and operations, and they all get into a room and they list all of the applications their various departments, have. And they are asked to list, determine which ones are high priority versus medium or low priority. And every department head thinks that their applications are the highest priority. And the challenge, of course, is that if you list everything as high priority, then nothing is high priority. So what you want to do is make sure that you've got people that are involved that are really willing to dive in and understand the difference between those things that really need to be first priority and be the first things to be brought back online in the event of a broad failure, and then can we bring them in the secondary and tertiary thereafter. So step one is start by generating the list of all those applications. And then when you start to determine the criticality, how do you determine what's high priority versus low priority? There's typically three factors that you usually, three questions you usually start to explore. If we lost access to it, how soon after that access is lost from that disaster is access required to move forward? How recent does that data need to be? Can it be minutes old, or can it, a backup from midnight last night suffice? And what's the longest I can wait to get it? Those three questions tie to three concepts of disaster recovery. And I always like to point out this slide because, if you need to give somebody a brief explanation afterwards what you learned today, you can say you talked about RTO, RPO, and MTD, and people will think you know what you're talking about. So recovery time objective answers that question. How fast do you need access to that information? So what is the recovery time objective for the recovery? Do I need it in 4 hours or 5 days, right? That's your recovery time objective. The recovery point objective is what is the oldest the data can be to be useful. So again, using that example, is the data in question something that needs to be an hour or less old, or can it be data that's a day or two old? Maybe that's a very low rate of change. Well, then you don't need to, the data point isn't quite as critical. And then maximum tolerable downtime is the critical metric. What is the longest you can wait to recover until you can't wait anymore? Because if you extend beyond that deadline, you're out of business. You've lost too much business to recover. Your clients are going to leave and so forth. So factoring in the recovery time objective, recovery point objective, and maximum tolerable downtime will typically land you into three different categories. I like to dub them must-haves, want-to-haves, and nice-to-haves, right? So the high priorities are the must-haves. Quite often, these are things that you want to have recovered in a business day or less, within one business day of the event. The nice-to-have, or the want-to-haves rather, typically are the second tier. Once the must-haves are recovered, you start down the list to the want-to-haves. Those usually last about 3 days or less. And then the nice to haves are all of those low priority items that aren't business critical. Usually what you find, that maximum tolerable downtime will vary depending on the business and industry. It can be 1 to 3 weeks is typically what we find is where that threshold will lie. Everybody's mileage varies a little bit, but that's all part of the analysis that everybody has to make for their particular environment. One of the most important aspects of creating business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans is, and I cannot stress this enough, if a plan isn't tested, you don't really have a plan. Testing is the most critical component. Now, for some organizations in certain industries, this is a requirement. For example, financial institutions are usually required by the Division of Banking in their respective states to have to run a disaster recovery test once a year where they actually simulate an actual disaster. It can be time consuming, it can be expensive. And because of that, many businesses that don't have those requirements do not run a test. However, from my experience in supporting financial institutions who routinely test all of their applications at least once a year, I don't care if you've run 12 tests, you will learn something on the 13th test that will make the 14th more efficient. So take the time. I strongly encourage everybody to stress test their recovery and actually verify that the recovery time and point objectives can be met. The good news is that through some of the technologies leveraged, there is some testing of data integrity for off-site data, for example, that's done as part of those that are, folks that are running Sourcepass managed backup solutions. But that's only testing the integrity of the data, that it's in a condition that's able to be recovered. If you have spare computers that are dedicated as part of your DR at your DR location and it hasn't been downloaded and verified at that location, that's the level of testing we're talking about. Let's actually simulate what would happen if a production environment location goes offline. This whole subject was substantially easier to talk about when the average small business 10 years ago had that beige server that was sitting under a receptionist's desk and all of the data was stored locally. But over the last 10 or 15 years, with more and more data moving to the cloud, data is everywhere. And in addition to inventorying those applications and data that are stored locally within your traditional local area network, looking at all of those data stores that might exist in AWS and Azure, not to mention your 365 instance and so forth, becomes critical. In addition, as I pointed out earlier, inventorying where some of the more casual file shares are occurring and leveraging your security awareness training to reinforce with your users, avoid shadow IT, and do not leverage those unsanctioned cloud storage platforms to put company data in personal cloud storage accounts. If all of these discussion points are a little bit much to manage, we can't help. And this is my one commercial slide, so I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. Our Sourcepass Cyber Advisory Services team can work with you as part of a cybersecurity compliance package to help you put some of the plans in place that we've discussed. And in addition, as part of this engagement, we'll actually help you continually to reassess and analyze to make sure that as changes to your environment occur, that associated policies and procedures are updated as well. So if you'd like more information on our cybersecurity compliance package, feel free to reach out to your client success manager or strategic advisor, or you can always reach out after this to events@sourcepass.com, which is monitored by myself and Kat Irizarry, who's helping to drive this on the back end today. So with that said, Kat, do we have any questions in the Q&A currently?
Hi, Dave. No, we don't right now.
Okay, so thank you. Everybody, if you have any questions through the course of the rest of the presentation, please feel free to go ahead and leverage the Q&A for that. And at this point, what I'd like to do is introduce you to Guillermo Marquez, who will start to run through how a modern backup approach accelerates recovery. And as I mentioned, we'll talk both about on-premise and cloud. So Guillermo, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And something that it's very interesting about the disaster recovery and the backups. And actually, Dave uh, made a very good point on this. Sometimes we tend to confuse the terms between business continuity and disaster recovery. They are not the same, are part of the same plan. However, the objectives of a business continuity plan, it's very different from the disaster recovery standpoint. The disaster recovery main objective is to recover your operations as soon as possible on your primary site. Doesn't matter where is that. It could be on premise, it could be on the cloud, it could be on a third party location. However, the idea is to recover your operations on your primary site as soon as possible. Why? Because you have everything prepared to be working like it's designed. You have all the know-how, you have all the infrastructure to be running as it should be designed. So that's why it's very important to understand that you have to perform a couple of studies before you're implementing a DRP. Dave spoke about the business impact analysis, also part of the business continuity plan, all the all the risk mitigation. So we have many different things that we have to be done before implementing the DRP. And definitely is not just part of the IT department. It should be multidisciplinary um, design. Why? Because maybe you as an IT, you know that, for example, your CRM is running, but you don't operate the CRM itself. Just so you need somebody from sales, or you need somebody from operations to understand if it's really working or not. Or maybe you are taking about your payroll system and you need somebody from HR in order to be sure that everything's running as it should be. Okay, so next one, please, Dave. So we have now many different types of threats. Number one, natural disasters. To be honest, natural disasters is less than 6%. Okay, that could be include hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, whatever you can mention over there. So it's just really about the 6% of the disasters that we have, but probably are the most those who create more problems because it will affect utilities, communications, and everything else. So that's a problem. Now we have another one, which is our pandemics. We notice this, and that's why Dave opened with the question about what it was the first stage, or why this impulse all the digital transformation on the companies, and it was because the COVID-19 pandemic. So the problem is that it doesn't affect the infrastructure. The problem is that affect the people, the know-how. So that's why also it's very important to have a very good disaster recovery plan, and most important at all, it's to have a very good documented disaster recovery, and obviously test it. Then we have the human factor. The human factor, it's very important to understand that it could be a hardware failure, a software corruption. So that's why it's very important to understand how it works, and your hardware, how it works, your warranties, and everything else. And also, a big number of data loss is the human error. Okay, the human error, it's very common. Somebody deletes something or overwrites something that it shouldn't be edited or deleted, and then we have a problem. And obviously we have now the cyber attacks, and the cyber attacks are getting one of the main vectors to create or to to be the origin of a disaster. We have many companies, we have many different government dependencies who has been affected by a cyber attack. Okay, 93% of the business has been attacked on the past 3 years. The problem is that sometimes the people know that has been attacked. The other portion, or a very large portion, does not know that has been attacked. Okay, so that's why it's very interesting and it's very important not just combine the part of the backups, but also the disaster recovery, because it will be your potential way to avoid that disaster or your data loss. Okay, next one, please, Dave. So we need to consider the expected and the unexpected. Okay, we need to talk about regulations and compliance, definitely, because many companies, depending on the vertical that they are running, it could be financial, it could be health, it could be government, it could be oil and gas, all those that require, most of the times are required to have a disaster recovery. Also, you have a better planning for people, because sometimes the most important part of the company maybe is not the information itself, but the problem is that the people, it's the one that generates that information. That's why also it's very important to understand how we are going to protect our people in case of a disaster. Then we have now, and it has been and a phenomenon that happened also with the COVID-19, we have scattered geographical locations. That's an issue also, because now most of the information is not longer on our data centers. Sometimes it's in a laptop, or it could be in a desktop, or even in the email. So that's why it's very important to understand what happens when we have many different geographical locations. So also the data lives on the devices elsewhere. We know since the pandemic, everybody went to work to home, and maybe we have on a hybrid model of be working, but most of the companies closed their offices, and now they are working just from home. So that's why it's very important to understand that sometimes the information is not longer in our data centers. Also, we need to understand how the communications and the training goes on in our disaster recovery. And now with the remote work, it's more important to know that we need to train our users and train the people who participates on the disaster recovery. Then we have the problem with what happens when it's difficult to get your data from the backups. You need a very modern platform in order to do very easily. So everybody which is inside the disaster recovery or is part of the disaster recovery, you should be able to use the platform in order to recover whatever we need. Okay, and also, which is very important, is protect our supply chain. And the most important is that sometimes we don't prioritize our information in the right way. For some companies, we have an ERP, we have a CRM, or we have just a file server, which is what is more important, the ERP or the CRM or our billing system or just a file server. So we need to prioritize what is important for the business and what is not. And also, the most important part of the disaster recovery, it's documented. If it's not well documented, then we will have a problem. We need to automate and also to have all the tests. The testing is very important because at the end, it will give you the peace of mind that you are doing whatever you need to get your business running. Okay, so next one, please, Dave. So who needs the disaster recovery? Pretty much everybody. Okay, sometimes we don't plan ahead. Sometimes we don't have a preventive policy inside the companies, but definitely there are key industries that need this kind of solutions. We are talking about disaster, financial services, healthcare, legal, transportation, business services, manufacturing, and construction. So definitely, these are key industries. But then we have another group of companies that those who rely on a mission critical applications and data, those which are subject to regulated compliance and requirements, and also are partners of a stringent supply chain. Also, those who are located in a disaster-prone areas. If you are in tornado alley, definitely you want to have one of these kind of solutions. Also, for those who are they have the lack of technical resources and heavy reliance on IT businesses for functions. Which company doesn't have now a heavy reliance on IT for the business? Most of the companies, even the smaller ones, those dental clinics, those small lawyer buffets or something like that, mostly the times all the systems are part now of their daily work, of their daily basis work. So the lack of disaster recovery experience. Also, this is very important because now it's a turnkey solution. Okay. Uh, Normally, when we are talking about the disaster recovery, we're thinking in all those old models where you need another amount of hardware, a lot of communications. You are talking about doubling your licensing, also replication, everything else like that. So fortunately, we don't need to talk more about that with these kind of solutions. Next one, please, Dave. So we have um, an AI-powered integration of data protection and cybersecurity cross with the NIST protection. So with our solution, definitely we can identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And now, sometimes, or somebody on your side may be asking, what happens with the cyber framework or cyber protective framework version 2.0? Okay. Now, also we can cover that one. This is the framework from the version one, and also we can help you to cover that from the side of the version 2.0. Okay. Next one, please. So what considerations we need when we are doing on-premise backup? It's very important to understand that sometimes we don't like, or because of the nature of our business, we need sometimes quick recovery. And we have many different options to have a hybrid model of disaster recovery, something that you can do locally when you don't have affected your communications or the most part of your infrastructure is still working. We can do on a hybrid model of disaster recovery, or in case that everything else it's failing, communications, your building, Dave gave a very good example of about the chemical spill, and we know that if we don't have access, we cannot run locally. We need to go to the cloud. So that's why it's very important to know that we can cover both sides. Okay, next one, please. So something which is very new and it's very good to know, it's that we have immutable backups. We have this kind of backups. This is a special portion of backups, and this is a special set for your storage, or where you are storing your backups, that doesn't allow the deletion of the data. You cannot modify or delete any kind of data from there. So we can ensure that no backup is lost or any data is easily recovered after we put this kind of backups on the immutable storage. We have two kind of You can set it in two ways during multiple backup. You can go for governance. So that means that the administrator can change the time when the information cannot be touched or modified. And then we have also the compliance mode. The compliance mode, once is set, you cannot remove that time. So let's say that because of your industry is asking you to have your backups and all your information for the next 5 years, then you can go there, put the information on the multiple, and it won't be changed. And you have the warranty that it won't be changed or deleted for the next 5 years. But you cannot change that. Okay, so something which is we add an extra layer of protection of your data. So we go to protect against any kind of hackers, any kind of ransomware attacks, and obviously our we can avoid any kind of accidental deletion. Okay, so next one, please. Then we have the continuous data protection. Remember, sometimes, as I told you before, and also Dave told you, most of the information is not longer in our data centers. Okay, so we have this tool or we have this functionality from our backups, and we can provide continuous data protection for your end users. Okay, so we are protecting all kind of applications. Let's say Office, Microsoft Office. You can say to LibreOffice or Apache Office. We can go to OpenOffice, any kind of application, not just for this kind of document and presentations, but also for another kind of information like engineering, like AutoCAD, or if you are on the side of media producing, you are also protected because we have the integration with, for example, Adobe Illustrator, Premiere, all these kind of for video and imaging edition. So the most important thing is that you can add that protection to any kind of application. You need to add just the executable and the kind of files that we are going to protect, and that's it. It's a part, and you can go. What is going to happen is every time that you have an autosave or the user manually hits the save button, automatically it will create a backup of the difference of the original backup. So you can get a backup. For example, if you set the autosave on your application for like every single minute, you will have a backup every single minute for this kind of file that you are protecting. So it will ensure that it's pretty much almost a zero data loss when they are working in the different workstations. Next one, please. We have the option also for one-click recovery. This one is very interesting because at the end, you can give the power to your end users to recover their system just by the click of one button. That's the only thing that they need to know. They don't need to be a specialist. They don't need to know how to boot a system. The only thing that they need to know is that they can recover their own system just by a click of a button. And this is not only for end users or for endpoints, it could be implemented also on the data centers. Okay, next one, please. And definitely, we have the instant restore. This is the part where I was talking before about when we have a hybrid model for disaster recovery. We can run your backups in an alternate hypervisor infrastructure that you have. Maybe you have a main, let's say, VMware infrastructure, and then you have a secondary Hyper-V infrastructure just for in case. So we can run our backups as a virtual machines. So the only thing you need is a ESXi or Hyper-V hypervisor, and then from there you can boot your backup and run it as a virtual machine. So the real difference between running anything in the cloud or waiting to recover everything from the cloud is that you can locally perform a very good and a very rapid recuperation. It could be just in seconds instead of waiting for minutes or maybe hours since you are beginning the recovery or whatever. So you can run in just seconds when you are virtualizing our backups and then run as a virtual machine. Okay, next one, please. Then something which is very important of the security is that we need to be sure that our backups are clean. Okay, so there is a way that you can run different scans for malware in our backups. So we ensure that you are recovering a version which is clean, okay, just to avoid the reinfection. So we can do this kind of scan on our backups. We will show you if something is wrong on your backup, and we will clean it for you, okay? And then we can ensure that when we are doing the server recovery, we are sure that your backup is clean. Also, we are going to update our digital signatures for the antivirus, and in case it needed, we can also do the patch for the operating system just to avoid this kind of virus or attack that you are trying to recover. So we will ensure that you are recovering a clean version of your backup. Okay, next one, please. Then also we have the data loss prevention. When you are using the very basic, we have a small portion of data loss prevention. We have something that we call device control. With this device control, you can block the usage, for example, of USB ports. They cannot connect everything on those USB ports. And you can say pen drives, external drives. They cannot connect pretty much anything. But you can create a whitelist of what you can connect on those devices. For example, let's say that you are a call center, and most of the systems now we are using this kind of headphones. We are using USB, so we can create this allow list and just connect, for example, audio device or a webcam or whatever you need for those kind of ports. You can block also the copy paste, the print screen. You can block also Bluetooth or whatever you need. Even printers can be blocked from this system. So in this way, we begin with the data loss prevention part. But we have another advanced pack for disaster recovery. For data loss prevention. On the data loss prevention, we can add, for example, we can monitor up to 70 different channels of communications. Let's say webmails, social media, file transfer systems, and many different options that we have to cover this kind when the users are trying to send some information. It could be illegal information, it could be restricted information. So we have a way to understand and create the policies automatically to block this kind of sending any kind of restricted information, and we have a log for everything. This kind of log for everything, it will give us a very good sense of what is happening and who is trying to exfiltrate important information of the company. Okay, next one, please. So we are going to have some considerations for backing up on cloud platforms. Okay, So number one, we can do the backup for 365. Okay, as Dave mentioned previously, one of the most used applications now is Teams. So we have over 145 million people using daily this kind of solution for sharing, for communicating, overall, just for collaboration as the main collaboration tool. So we can do the backup for 365. We can do not just the email, which is the most common application that we are trying to protect, but also we can protect the backup, or we can do the backup for OneDrive, SharePoint, and definitely for Microsoft Teams. Okay, this is very important. And now we are going to talk about the Microsoft Share Responsibility Model, because sometimes we have the question, okay, why should I invest in this kind of solution, or why should I purchase this kind of solution if Microsoft protects my data? Okay, so very far from the reality. Okay, their responsibility as Microsoft is just the cloud service availability, data replication, and your redundancy. The recycle bin enables short-term for data loss recovery. You cannot recover nothing longer than 30 days. Okay, but what happens with an email? It's older than 30 days. You are going to lose this kind of emails. So they are also responsible for the security on physical data center security, app level, and user and admin controls. And also on the compliance side, they are part of role as a data processor. They need to ensure about the data privacy and regulatory controls, industry certifications, including HIPAA or SOX, for example. But your responsibility as a customer and us as service providers is to access and control your 365 data, the 365 data backup. Okay, even on the level on the service agreement level from Microsoft on their point on the point 6 or 7, I just forgot, on the under the letter B, it will say that they are not responsible for the data, and they really encourage you to use a third-party application in order to run the backups. Okay, so this is part of why it's very good to know that we can provide not only the backup on your data center or your end users, but also on your cloud applications like 365, Google Workspace. In case that you are using Google Workspace, we also have the backup for this kind of solutions. So then what we can do when you are doing the Microsoft share responsibility. So the responsibilities, your risk is what happens if something is an accidental deletion. It could be a problem. The problem is also from the side of Microsoft. It's a slow recovery and it's a very limited retention. So the idea is with our partners from Sourcepass and us as Acronis, we can do the backup for everything. We can have unlimited retention, and the most important, we have a granular recovery. You don't need to recover the whole mailbox. If you want to recover just a particular message, we can do that. Okay. So also on the side of security, we have ransomware, malicious insiders, and definitely those phishing attempts. And in the case we have the multiple storage encryption, we can encrypt up to AES 256, which is military grade encryption. And definitely we have with active protection, ransomware protection. Okay. On the case of compliance, we have the data leaks, GDPR, SOX, FINRA, and the long-term retention. In this case, Us as Acronis, we have 52 different data centers. We have a transparent reporting, and definitely we have an audit log to know every single step that an administrator or an user took in order for every single action on the backups, deletion, or whatever you need. Okay, next one, please. So something which is very important is that we protect over 20 different types of workloads. Okay, we support virtual machines which are running in Azure, Windows servers. It could be physical or virtual servers. We can protect it. We have Windows PC, Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, Active Directory, Hyper-V, Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, virtual machines running on AWS, Linux server, not just the paid ones like SUSE or Linux, so Red Hat, sorry, but also support open versions like CentOS, Fedora, Debian, Ubuntu, and many other different distributions. We do support Mac, iPhone, iOS, or iPadOS. They are supported. Also, we do support Android, SAP HANA, MariaDB, and MySQL. Also, we support the most important hypervisors on the market. I have already mentioned Hyper-V, but also we support VMware vSphere. We support Oracle virtualization or OVIRT. We support it. We support Oracle in their databases also. We support Red Hat virtualization, Linux KVM. For example, if somebody of you use Proxmox, which is an open source hypervisor, which is based on KVM, it's perfectly support. We have Citrix and Server, Virtuoso, and also we have support for Acropolis of Nutanix. Okay, next one, please. And why Acronis? Definitely because we do support and we have many different certifications. We are supported for GDPR, GLBA, HIPAA, ISO 27001, 9001, the TAA. So we have many different certifications, not only for the US, but also for European standards, definitely. Okay, next one, please. So,
Guillermo, that's the end of your session. So I've been monitoring the Q&A, and there's no questions currently submitted. So I'll take that to mean that we've met or exceeded your expectations in terms of content that you expected to see today. If you do have any questions that you have thought of that you'd like to follow up on, as I offered earlier, please feel free to contact your customer service representative or your solutions architect, and they'll be happy to get you an answer. If you're not currently engaged with us, you can reach out to our sales team as well. So real quick, we've got a couple of upcoming events that I wanted to cover. I mentioned this is part of our digital transformation series, and in the next 2 months, April session will be focused on the mobile edition of our Quest service platform, some tips and tricks and best practices. For those that are unaware, the Quest Mobile for iOS app is currently available for download in the Apple App Store. So if you would like to be able to look at your service ticket history, or I will say one of the use cases that we're getting a lot of positive feedback on is when there's that beep coming from the server room and you want to record a little video of what's going on and attach it to a service ticket. Folks are absolutely loving having the Quest platform available as on their mobile device. Quest for Android might be released in time for this session. We're hoping to have that released in April, so we'll be focused on that. In May, we're still nailing down the details, but it will be cybersecurity related. And as that gets dialed in, please visit sourcepass.com/events for registration information and an eye on your inbox for an invitation as well. Now, in addition to the digital transformation series, we also offer a learning series for our clients to get more out of their existing kind of value of the technology that they've already deployed. April session will be around Edge with Copilot in Windows 11. And then in May, we'll deep dive into Excel, go beyond the basics. As a person who has worked with a pivot table or two in his day, if you think you're an Excel master, you're probably still just scratching the surface. So I'd encourage folks that are working Excel to take that session as well. So if you'd like to learn more and want help in implementing disaster recovery plans, as I said, you can reach out to your client success manager, or if you want to just email events@sourcepass.com, that is managed by Kat and myself, and we'd be happy to loop in the appropriate resources for you to discuss it. So again, Dave Delvecchio, VP of Marketing Communications at Sourcepass. Thank you for taking part. Guillermo, thank you very much for your assistance today as well. I appreciate what you brought to this presentation. Anybody who's watching, we'll leave this slide up for a second. If you'd like to screen capture it or jot down an email address, we'd be happy to follow up with you. Thanks for spending what's probably been your lunch hour with us, and hope everybody has a fine rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave, and have a great day, everyone. Okay.